There's a set piece with player music on it.
Ooh.
One cool thing about this technology was created in the 1600s into the 1700s. It was originally made to help weaving. You could use this kind of same punch card technology to program massive looms that could weave patterns into clothes. Well, this technology stuck with us for a long time. And in the 1800s, it became, you had things like player pianos, which we'll get to one in a little bit. But then this is the exact same technology they used to fly us to the moon. This punch card technology was the original computer programming language. And the lady who programmed the Apollo 13 shuttle, or the Apollo 11 shuttle, her stack of punch cards was taller than she was. But this technology here that dates back to the 1700s got us to the moon with very little change.
What do you think makes our artifacts or our archives different, special, and or unique?
One of the things that I think makes us unique is our tight, specific focus. This museum focuses not on World War II like you would get at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and it doesn't focus on like natural history. It's focused on Grand Rapids and the greater Grand Rapids area, so branching out to Michigan and some other places, but focusing on the locality. The museum was originally created by the school district, and it never really went away from that. So the museum is part of the Grand Rapids community, and it shows its history through its collections and its artifacts. It has stuff from the furniture companies, hence this massive room. Grand Rapids was the furniture capital of the world, making most of the world's wooden furniture back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This definitely shows all that. And it shows how Grand Rapids has changed and evolved over time to meet and to fit in its local community. So Grand Rapids, first and foremost, I think what makes it unique is that it's a museum that represents the community it's in. It's not themed around natural history or a certain war or something, but it's a museum about Grand Rapids.
How many artifacts in the archives make it to the museum?
About 5%-ish. So there are over 250,000 artifacts in the archives as a whole. Some are lent out, some are just temporary, but on a whole, only about 5% actually make it into the museum and make it so other people can see them. So that's not very much. Like this player piano, for example, it really only sees the light of day when people walk past. I gotta find the on switch if I can. Again, we have here the same technology that sent us to the moon. That same technology in this player piano. Thank you, piano.
My name is Grant Carmichael. I've lived in Grand Rapids since 1991, so almost 30 years. Grand Rapids has changed a lot. When I first moved here in 1991, I got a job in Grand Rapids and decided to move here. And my first day on the job was in July 1991. And I remember driving downtown Grand Rapids after accepting the job and realizing I thought I made a colossal mistake. It was super quiet downtown, nothing was going on, and from my perspective at that age, I thought, oh my gosh, this is not like a big city, and driving around, and I was like, wow, I'm not sure I made a good choice. But something funny happened. A few years later, it was 1995, things are starting to happen downtown. We had coffee shops, which was new at the time. And Grand Rapids, up until that point, was really only known for having the Festival of the Arts here in downtown, which is an all-volunteer festival, which is very unique for other parts of the country. And my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, Zoe, we were recruited by friends of ours to volunteer at this event and help with a children's event called Glue In. And the camaraderie that came out of that, the opportunities that came out of that, kind of painted a different picture of the town that I maybe didn't make the right assessment of when I first got here. I learned that Alexander Calder's sculpture was here. That was one of the first public arts funded events in the country for National Endowment of the Arts. Started to become more aware of the design history here with the furniture companies and Herman Miller and Steelcase and Hayworth, etc. And as I got more into design firms here, I started to see the benefits of going out to the lake shore and seeing a big lake and not necessarily having to deal with traffic and terrible parking and that kind of thing. Wow, 18 years ago I thought I made a colossal error being in this town, but here we are now, and we're part of what's changing about it.
One man who was said to be handcuffed was said to be pushed down some stairs.
Please refrain from going into the area, the limits which I have just described.
Machine gun and shotguns and rifles. An army tank moved in, and then moved in the armored cars, the mobile cars. This is Detroit, an uneasy city. It isn't as if the racial trouble came exactly unexpected. The Motor City has been preparing for it for years. But you can make just so many...
I think that, you know, it's hard, you know, it's 2019 right now, and you can like look back on history, and it's easy to confuse the larger national political narrative with, and try and infer that that is what has happened in Grand Rapids.
I watched buildings burn. I watched people throw Molotov cocktails.
And we think that's something that happened down there, but we really had these issues here in Grand Rapids.
On July 23, 1967, one of the most violent and destructive riots broke out in the streets of Detroit, leaving 43 people dead and hundreds more injured. Just 2 days after the Detroit riots began, rioting appeared in the streets of Grand Rapids, leaving neighborhoods devastated and even more people injured.
It flared up just like it did in Detroit, without the total consequences of Detroit.
You know, in some ways there's positive and negative things that came out of it. I think the perception of the community, I think that, you know, for some of these young men, the dignity had been driven down so much that it was intolerable.
An official report entitled The Anatomy of a Riot did not believe that the Detroit riots were connected to the Grand Rapids riots.
And the Grand Rapids riots were like nothing compared to Detroit. I mean, Detroit is still light from riots in there. Now here, a lot of where the places that were destroyed, you know, there's things there now. There's the Health and Human Services office is where pretty much where the main part of the riots happened, the main blocks that got.
Weeks before the uprising, police had begun to aggressively crack down on drugs and prostitution in the area, escalating tensions between the African American community and the police.
I mean, you're already talking about a pretty fearful community that was made more fearful of the African American community. There's an association with African Americans and criminality, especially in policing culture here. And I feel that maybe that helped reinforce that absolutely false stereotype, this idea that you have something to fear.
Speaking on behalf of Mayor Sonneveld and myself, City Manager Neighbors, we are proposing to establish a prohibited area in the near southeast end, a district bounded on the east by Madison, on the south by Cottage Grove, on the west by the Expressway, and of course on the north by Walthey. We ask all people, and we particularly place emphasis on all people, to please refrain from going into the area, the limits which I have just described.
Design is a class where we learn to use design principles and elements to create stuff like using Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and Premiere, and learning how to use equipment so that we can make videos. And we use design class to get information across.
When you're in a learning environment, sometimes it's not as much about whether or not you like the projects, or if you find the projects, I guess, entertaining in some cases, as long as you're learning something. In this case, some of the projects, I guess, were back and forth in some places, but in the end I learned how to use the softwares that I was hoping to use, so it was beneficial to me in the end.
Design was a class where we got to learn the basics of Photoshop, and then in the second semester we got to learn how to do video and proper video production.
I do believe that design is a valuable class to teach in schools. For one, graphic design is becoming more and more important, and there are more and more careers where it's involved. And so it'd be good if you're in, especially if it's an elective, if you're interested in it, then you can take it and learn more about it, learn how to use the programs that you'll use.
For our final video project, me and Jocelyn and Adam and Maddie made a video. Our video was about recycling, and our audience was young children, and we wanted to teach them about how to recycle right so that they don't throw their trash into the recycling bins, because then you can't recycle. Design is key to communication. You need to learn how to design it right so that you can get the right information across.